This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Ukraine says North Korean troops are already at the front lines. According to Kyiv, Russia has deployed the North Korean soldiers in the Kursk region. Ukraine reports that Russia is training as much as 12,000 North Korean troops. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has the latest.
Anti-South Korea leaflets flying over Seoul on Thursday. North Korea dropped them as the president of Poland was arriving. Tensions between the North and South are rising. The Pentagon on Thursday once again confirming that Russia is training 3,000 North Korean troops, possibly to fight against Ukraine.
There's a clear relationship and clear link between the DPRK and Russia.
The US says Russia is violating UN resolutions by accepting military support from North Korea. On Wednesday, the White House said there will be consequences.
The United States will announce a significant sanctions tranche targeting the enablers of Russia's war in Ukraine.
And amid rising tensions between North and South Korea, the US is holding a joint military drill with the South on Thursday. The drills aim to diversify wartime transportation and improve support capabilities. But Russia on Thursday, doubling down on its ties with North Korea.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has always been supporting our country in the most complicated situations.
The lower house of the parliament voted to ratify a treaty of partnership between Russia and North Korea. Also in Russia on Thursday, it's the last day of the BRICS coalition summit, and Russian President Vladimir Putin is criticizing the West. He's accusing Western allies of issuing illegal sanctions, manipulating the stock market, currencies, and more. Also at the summit, Putin did not deny claims that Russia is training North Korean troops.
We never doubted that the leadership of North Korea treats our agreements seriously. But what we will do and how will we do it is up to us.
Putin also says the West is using Ukraine to impose strategic defeat on Russia. And Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas also addressed the summit, speaking about the conflict in Gaza.
The time has come for an end to injustice and relying on military force and prolonging the occupation.
He says there's a strong need for an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East. Abbas seeks a UN Security Council resolution to implement a truce. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
South Korea is now confirming reports that it might support Ukraine with lethal weapons. That's to counter North Korea's possible influence in the war. South Korea currently has a policy of not supplying lethal weapons, but the country's president now says that they could review and adopt this policy if necessary. This would mark an escalation in the conflict, with two Indo-Pacific nations becoming involved in the war in Europe. Hezbollah terrorists have launched a barrage of rockets into northern Israel, injuring multiple civilians. Meanwhile, Israel has released documents alleging close cooperation between the Al Jazeera TV network and Hamas. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Israel's air defense systems were put to the test on Thursday as Hezbollah terrorists fired about 50 rockets into northern Israel, according to Israeli officials. 3 people were injured when one of the rockets hit a road in the city of Nahariya. And about an hour later, terrorists in Lebanon fired another barrage of rockets into northern Israel. And in a different city, a rocket hit a residential building and injured 1 person.
We evacuated a man who was probably injured by shrapnel or fragments of broken glass. Lucky he got out of the apartment.
One of the residents there said she ran to a shelter after she heard the sirens going off.
Then 10 seconds later, we heard explosions. And then few seconds later, we heard a huge explosion. After we left the shelter, we saw debris and broken windows. We are not safe in this road. Nobody cares about us at all.
And across the border in Lebanon, firefighters and emergency crews responded to areas in Beirut that were hit by Israeli airstrikes. And many are wondering how much longer the fighting will continue. Israel's chief of the general staff gave this message to troops.
In the north, there's a possibility of reaching a sharp conclusion. We thoroughly dismantled Hezbollah's senior chain of command. Determination and persistence, that's the key. Now, they are determined too, but we are much more. Because we are better, we are more justified, and also because we are stronger.
And Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with officials in Qatar on Thursday, where he continues to push for a ceasefire. Israel and Egypt are also planning to join in talks in the coming days to try to end the war in the Gaza Strip now that the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, has been killed. The U.S. says that Sinwar was the main obstacle to a ceasefire deal. And in another development, the Israel Defense Forces released documents from the Hamas terrorist group that indicate it cooperates closely with the Al Jazeera TV network. The documents reportedly prohibit the station from criticizing Hamas or even using the word massacre when describing Hamas's failed rocket launches that killed several civilians. We reached out to Al Jazeera for comment, but we didn't hear back before airtime. However, Al Jazeera has previously denied any affiliation with Hamas. Jason Perry, NTD News.
For the first time on the campaign trail, Vice President Harris and former President Obama will appear together. NTD's Jason Blair joins us live from Atlanta, Georgia. Jason, what can you tell us about tonight's event?
Yeah, hey, so coming into the home stretch with the election less than 2 weeks away, the Harris campaign has really shifted more into a closing arguments phase and getting people energized to get out and cast their ballot. And they haven't been shy of bringing in some star power to help them out in their events, like here in Atlanta. We do have quite a few big names here. We already mentioned Obama's going to be here a little bit later, but actually earlier we just heard from Samuel L. Jackson. We heard from Spike Lee, and then later on in the night, rock superstar Bruce Springsteen will be playing some songs to close out the night. And Springsteen actually did officially endorse Harris not that long ago. We have a clip from his official video endorsement. Have a look.
I'm supporting Kamala Harris for president and Tim Walz for vice president, and opposing Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. He doesn't understand the meaning of this country, its history, or what it means to be deeply American. On the other hand, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are committed to a vision of this country that respects and includes everyone, regardless of class, religion, race, your political point of view, or sexual identity.
So Springsteen does have a history of being pretty publicly outspoken. He endorsed Obama, he endorsed Hillary Clinton back in 2016, and he was also outspoken about endorsing Biden in 2020. Now, so he's going to be coming out tonight playing a few songs. He might even be saying a few words as well, so we'll be hearing from him in a bit.
And Jason, Vice President Harris recently did a town hall. I understand there's been a lot of mixed reactions to how it went.
Yeah, that's right. There have been a lot of mixed reactions. Some people have been saying, you know, really good things about it. Some people have been saying she really didn't accomplish her goal of reaching more swing voters with that town hall. Specifically, former Obama advisor David Axelrod had some things to say while he was on CNN, and I do have a clip from that as well. Have a look.
The things that would concern me is when she doesn't want to answer a question, her habit is to kind of go to word salad city, and she did that on a couple of answers. One was on Israel. Anderson asked a direct question, would you be stronger on Israel than Trump? And there was a 7-minute answer, but none of it related to the question he was asking. And so, you know, on certain questions like that, on immigration, I thought she missed an opportunity because she would acknowledge no concerns about any of the administration's policies.
So, yeah, there has been a lot of chatter about that town hall. There still probably will be a lot more coming out. But back to the campaign trail, Harris is not stopping. She will be in Houston tomorrow. She will be on Saturday. She'll be in Kalamazoo, Michigan, with former First Lady Michelle Obama. Again, getting a lot of stars and big names into her campaign events, and we'll probably be seeing more of that coming into Election Day. Back to you.
All right, Jason, thank you for that update. Close to 30 million Americans have already cast their votes in the 2024 election. Arizona continues to be a crucial battleground as officials begin tabulating ballots Wednesday. NTD's Christina Corona is on the ground in Arizona with more.
We're here in Phoenix, Arizona at a polling station on the Arizona State University campus where many residents have already cast their early ballots. We spoke to several early voters to find out why they chose to vote early.
Yeah, it's important to get it counted because it's going to get really busy later on. That's the primary reason, to get it in there as soon as possible. And so I didn't want to drop it in a regular mailbox, so I physically drove it down here.
Maricopa County, the second largest voting district in the U.S., is home to more than 60% of Arizona's registered voters. Residents shared which policies matter most to them this election season.
Abortion, right for women to control their own bodies.
Especially abortion and immigration, because that deals with people. Like, it directly impacts people, and I think that is more important than anything else.
In Phoenix, Arizona, dozens of workers gathered in 2 large rooms on Wednesday to begin tabulating ballots at the Maricopa County Elections Office.
It's the first day that we're able to start tabulating the ballots that we've received in the mail for early voting, as well as those ballots that we're getting in our early vote centers that are coming here today.
Maricopa County has brought on over 3,000 temporary full-time employees to assist with the election process.
They're working, full-time, full days here, and it's all being live streamed. That's the great thing about the tabulation center here. It's secure and it's transparent. All the cameras that you see in here, voters can go and watch 24/7 what's going on in the tabulation room, what's going on in ballot processing.
A county election official who wished to remain anonymous told us that at least 200 voters cast their ballots on Wednesday at the ASU England polling station, with the majority being first-time voters attending the university.
I just think it's important to vote so you can make a change in what you believe in. I think if people lose that, they lose a part of themselves.
More inclusion and our rights protected for me as a woman, me as a black woman, and my other diverse brothers and sisters and siblings, and just kind of having our rights protected and moving forward in that direction.
Reporting from Phoenix, Arizona, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Former President Donald Trump is speaking in Tempe, Arizona right now, just 25 minutes from downtown Phoenix. Here's a bit of what he said.
So when I win on November 5th to migrate, and remember this, we're going to win. I think we're going to win maybe bigger than anyone understands. And when I win on November 5th, and it's not me, we win. We're going to win. When we win on November 5th, the migrant invasion ends and the restoration of our country begins. We're going to restore our country. They come in. It's like a magnet. They come in. They're promised everything. In New York, they get hotel rooms, luxury hotel rooms, and our veterans are forced to sleep on the streets. Think of it.
The former president will be heading to Las Vegas, Nevada later tonight for an event with Turning Point. He'll be joined by Turning Point founder Charlie Kirk, former Democrat Tulsi Gabbard, and former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Senator J.D. Vance is rallying in another swing state today, Michigan. That's as his running mate, former President Trump, is set to appear there tomorrow. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more on the main issues facing Michigan in the general election.
We're here in Waterford, Michigan, where Senator J.D. Vance is holding a rally. Michigan's a very critical swing state, holding 16 electoral college votes, making it one of the biggest swing states and very necessary to win here.
Look, we've only got so many more, there's a finite amount of re-election rallies left. I want to contribute in social media as best I can by bringing attention to my favorite issue, which is border integrity. Sometimes it's going to be tough. It's not always going to be a 13-hour drive like this one was, but I'm going to try and get to as many as I can.
Senator J.D. Vance has said that the biggest threat facing the United States is the Chinese Communist Party. And this follows the House Oversight Committee, who just released a report saying federal agencies aren't doing enough to counter the Chinese Communist Party's unrestricted warfare, particularly on manufacturing fentanyl, infiltration into colleges, buying farmland, and spying on U.S. military bases. Now, here in Michigan, just earlier this month, there were 5 Chinese students who were charged with lying about spying on a U.S. military base. Now, meanwhile, former President Trump is rallying in Arizona, where he said that he'll have presidential immunity, and that would allow him to fire Special Prosecutor Jack Smith in the 2 cases that he's brought against him. Now, the cases include the classified documents case, which was dismissed but is being appealed, dismissed back in July. And Smith is also heading the case against Trump, accusing him trying to overturn the 2020 election results. Now, former President Trump also raised the issue earlier this week in the Bronx of doing away with federal income tax. He said that he would replace that with higher tariffs on other countries, particularly China. Reporting from Waterford, Michigan, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And joining us now at the Legal Hub is our legal correspondent, Arlene Richards. Arlene, there's been a lot of talk about the significance of the swing states in this election. There's also been a lot of election laws changed at the state level since 2020, and with that, a lot of lawsuits being filed. What are some of the most significant issues?
Well, the 2 issues that are really pressing right now are mail-in ballots and voter rolls. So let's talk about mail-in ballots. Now, these cases are being filed in every swing state. So what are they saying about them? Well, the Republicans are saying invalid ballots should be tossed. If they don't have the proper postmark or the date or they're not in a sealed envelope, then they should be tossed. Democrats are saying that we need to ensure that all legally registered voters can vote. If they are citizens and they have a valid ID and they've registered to vote, then their votes should count. Now, the courts are largely agreeing with the Democrats, but Republicans have won several cases. For example, in Pennsylvania, the court ruled that ballots without a date must be rejected. So in this case, Republicans or Democrats actually challenged this rule, and the judge said that it's too close to the election, and so this rule will stand. But they also ruled that voters have to have an opportunity to cure the undated ballots. So one win for the Republicans and another win for the Democrats.
All right, and what about the voter rolls? What have both sides been saying about that?
So we've talked about mail-in ballots. Now we'll get into voter rolls. So these cases also have been filed in every swing state. Now, Republicans are saying we need to remove ineligible voters from the voter rolls. They're saying if they're not a citizen, if they've moved out of the state, or if they haven't been active for a long time, then they need to be removed from the rolls. Democrats are saying it's too late to remove voters from the voter rolls. There is a federal law that says you can't make any major changes to the voter rolls within 90 days of the election. So now it's too late. And the courts are largely agreeing with the Democrats. Now, we have a court in North Carolina recently ruled that you can't purge voters. Republicans had said that the state had failed to purge 225,000 voters that they didn't ensure were eligible to vote. And the judge said that the state had actually investigated and didn't find any problems. So these are some of the cases that have been filed, that have been continued to be filed across all the swing states. They could be coming up again post-election if there are any challenges to the election results.
All right, a lot to look at here, Arlene. Thank you so much for that update.
All right, thank you.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Another challenge for Boeing. Striking workers have voted down its latest contract offer. Now the walkout continues, and so do Boeing's losses. Here's the report.
Boeing workers rejected a wage deal and chose to continue striking Wednesday, extending a month-long strike, damaging the company's finances.
Today, members voted to reject the company's latest offer by 64%.
The plane maker's latest offer had included a 35% wage hike over 4 years. Its rejection marks the second deal the union has voted down. The last offer was rejected by 95% of workers voting last month and triggered the strike. Workers have been frustrated with a decade of wages that have lagged behind inflation, while Boeing spent billions on share buybacks and paid out record executive bonuses. Among their demands was a 40% pay hike and the return of a defined benefit pension. International Association of Machinists District 751 President John Holden said the union would continue pushing for better terms.
You know, this wasn't enough for our members. There is a big gap that we couldn't reach, especially when it's been 16 years since we've had a chance to bargain every area of our contract. And trying to make all that up in one is very hard to do, but our members deserve more. They've spoken loudly, and we're going to go back to the table to try to achieve those things.
The strike involves 30,000 machinists in Boeing's West Coast factories and has halted production of Boeing's best-selling plane. During its quarterly earnings call on Wednesday, Boeing reported net losses of $6.2 billion in the third quarter this year and forecasted would burn cash through 2025. New CEO Kelly Ortberg warned there was no quick fix for the struggling company. Time is also running out for Boeing's suppliers. Many heavily invested in materials and tooling to support Boeing's planned ramp-up of jets. But they've also had to furlough workers in recent weeks and hold off on investments due to the strikes. One of them, Spirit Aerosystems, says a 21-day furlough of 700 workers will begin in days' time. Spirit has warned of more drastic furloughs and layoffs should the strikes continue beyond November.
Europe and the United States have imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles to prevent the market from being flooded with cheap products. But the flood could happen anyway. Carmaker Stellantis in Europe found a way to get around the penalties and work with Chinese carmakers, a scenario that might occur in the United States. Let's hear the details from NTD's international correspondent, David Vives.
The European Union announced on July the imposition of new tariffs of up to 38% on electric vehicles imported from China to prevent Chinese dumping in the EV market. However, Chinese manufacturers appear to have found a loophole by teaming up with European carmakers. In June, Stellantis signed a $1.6 billion deal with the Chinese group Leapmotor for a joint venture. The world's fourth largest carmaker plans to produce 4 EV models, including SUVs from a new factory in Poland. Stellantis began selling its new EV models in September 24th in countries like France, Italy, and Germany. Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares said the best way to compete in the EV market is to try to be Chinese ourselves. However, Stellantis European new car sales slumped 25% in September 2024, following a 48% drop in sales during the first half of 2024. The cars maker action highlight some loopholes in EU legislation.
In the end, we can't cope with dumping from abroad or from China. If China decide to dump the European market, there's nothing we can do.
President of 40 Million Drivers Association Patrick Chasseret says that the EU's protective tariffs will be circumvented at some point.
EU can't regulate market prices because when it comes down to it, electric battery technology, not to mention the research and development that's already being done in Asia on batteries alone, means that we're 100% dependent on them.
The EU Commission's tariffs follow growing concerns about EU car manufacturers. The EU has ruled that gasoline-powered car production will stop by 2035, a challenging timeline for car makers engaged in an R&D race to survive in the fully electric future of the EU car market. Chasseret says the full EV legislation is the source of the problem.
The political mistake was to focus on 100% electric cars, when in France and Europe we had technologies that would enable us to move towards carbon neutrality, other than 100% electric cars.
David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
President Biden urging defense and intel agencies to ramp up the use of artificial intelligence that to outcompete communist China and to protect Americans' national security. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
President Biden is directing the Pentagon and intelligence agencies to increase their use of AI. The goal is to maintain an edge over rivals like China. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the new memo published on Thursday is the nation's first ever strategy for harnessing the power of AI to advance U.S. national security.
We have to be faster in deploying AI in our national security enterprise than America's rivals are in theirs. They are on a persistent quest to leapfrog our military and intelligence capabilities.
Sullivan says AI is already reshaping how our security agencies plan logistics, prevent cyber attacks, and analyze intelligence. And he warns that countries like China are also using AI to revolutionize its military and intelligence capabilities. As a result, the U.S. must outpace China.
We know that China is building its own technological ecosystem with digital infrastructure that won't protect sensitive data, that can enable mass surveillance and censorship, that can spread misinformation, and that can make countries vulnerable to coercion.
Meanwhile, concerns are growing over the Chinese Communist Party spreading misinformation trying to sway voters in the U.S. election. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence warned this week that countries like China are using social media to denigrate some candidates in presidential and congressional races. The office added that some social media posts are likely to be generated by AI. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Joining us now to explore the AI race against China is retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb. He's an international military strategist and former Black Hawk helicopter pilot. Darren, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. To begin, multiple reports state the Chinese regime has been using social media to try to influence down-ballot races in this year's election. How consequential is this election in terms of global politics? Could it reshape it?
Well, it could. It's going to be extremely consequential because, with what I do on an international scale and across the United States, I get lots of notes from people around the world saying they're watching the United States to see which direction we take, because it's going to be a huge symbol towards whether or not we're going to step away from the increasing centralization of power and control, even at a federal level here, and worst case, even to a global level, or whether or not we're going to step away from that and grow towards more decentralized local politics, again, like it really is designed and supposed to be here in the United States. That's the biggest difference. And the result of either one of those either takes you more towards tyrannical type regimes and centralization of power, or further away and more liberty-based approach to elections. And that's not only in the United States, which is what China's trying to influence, but it's actually in elections around the world. And that's the direction either side is going to choose, A or B.
When it comes to communist China, there's a growing focus on artificial intelligence. President Biden actually just issued the nation's first national security memorandum on the use of AI. How does U.S. preparation for the rise of AI and the threats it poses compare to the advancement of AI, especially that developed by, say, hostile nations?
Well, AI is like any tool. And in the hands of bad actors, it can be used very badly. And in the hands of good actors, it can be used for positive developments. It's not only in conflict, but in I guess, the civilization worldwide. But when it comes down to artificial intelligence, there's the intelligence analysis portion of it, which AI can be used to speed up the process of doing analysis to be able to get to a decision. Within machinery, it can be used to speed up the process of those machines processing data and getting to the point where they can either launch a weapon, point a laser, things like that. So the ultimate question comes down to, in many parts of warfare, is who pushes the final button. And let's just go to a nuclear world and say that if AI controls it from the beginning all the way to the end in order to speed up the process, and it becomes automated launch of something like that, that's one thing. But in the other side of this is, do you always have a human in the process regardless? Because that's what's, I would consider personally the most critical aspect, is maintaining that human link, not using AI to speed things up so fast that you can't undo it and stop a mistake.
On that note, following Biden's directive today, the defense industry is honing in, with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan warning that if the U.S. fails to deploy AI before our adversaries, it could wipe out decades of advantages the U.S. currently holds in, say, land, air, sea, space, and cyber. What kind of role do you see AI playing in U.S. defense?
Well, a couple key things. First of all is the ability to aggregate and analyze intelligence information from databases and other systems around the world and in space, and get to a conclusion faster that allows you to act faster than an adversary. And again, whether that's a human pushing a final button of some kind on the end or a system, AI gets you there faster. The other thing is then becomes that actual targeting mechanisms on aircraft, on ships, regardless of the system itself, the ability to process that information internal to those systems and reach the point where you can engage a target or take a picture or do something along those lines. Those are a couple of critical components, because intelligence leads to operations and leads to some sort of action. And the question again is, does the final action fall on the hands of a human or in the hands purely of an autonomous system, regardless of human input?
And with all that's at stake here, what will the next administration and Congress need to do to ensure an adversarial regime like the Chinese Communist Party doesn't win the AI race?
Well, we need to continue to invest in it and put it in the hands of people who look at it as an actual useful tool in the pursuit and defense of our nation, and not used in some other nefarious way, potentially even against our own people, unfortunately, which is always possible. So they have to invest in it and get people who are willing to come into the Department of Defense and other agencies throughout government and use their skills and talents in order to move AI through those systems, and not purely be a private sector effort where ultimately a lot of those jobs are paid much higher in the private sector than they would ever be in the government.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, international military strategist and former Black Hawk helicopter pilot, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good night, Tiffany.
Coming up on Capitol Report, a new congressional report detailing the Chinese Communist Party's political warfare and influence operation in America. NTD's Steve Lance sits down with House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer for an in-depth analysis. Be sure to tune in at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight here on NTD News. North Carolina's governor is proposing a budget to deal with recovery from Hurricane Helene. He said it was the most damaging storm ever to hit the state. And at the same time, North Carolinians have already cast over 2 million ballots in the presidential election. NTD's David Lamb reports.
North Carolina's Board of Elections announced that 26% of voters have turned out in the battleground state so far. More than 2 million ballots have been cast as of Thursday morning in the 2024 general election. Meanwhile, North Carolina is still recovering after Hurricane Helene hit the western part of the state in September. Governor Roy Cooper proposed a budget this week, recommending an initial $3.9 billion package for further recovery. His office said the initial damage estimates are $53 billion. That's almost triple the estimate of 2018's Hurricane Florence. The governor said Helene is the deadliest and most damaging storm ever to hit North Carolina. His office says that recovery will require significant investments by private insurers as well as federal, state, and local governments. The governor's funding package includes $650 million to help offset economic losses and damage to non-agricultural businesses and nonprofits. Another $650 million will help fund residential repairs and provide housing assistance. David Lamb, NTD News.
As the election approaches, which policies or issues would voters like to see on the ballot? And which presidential candidate is a better fit to deliver what voters want? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
What we got? Okay, one policy, one issue you would like to put on the ballot. What would that be?
Ooh, on the ballot, let's reduce inflation index.
I want to protect our right to have guns to arm ourselves. That's important.
The cost of petroleum has to come down because that dictates how your inflation is going.
So immigration would be the one issue right now. Because of the illegals that are coming in, it would be good for them to follow the process that's already established.
Let's see. Let's start with abortion. Let's start with immigration on the liberal side. We've all got to live here, and I want us to live happily, all of us.
How about something like the country coming together? I think if we could come together and not have so much division, I think we'd be better off.
I would prefer that we don't have any ballot issues. Generally, the ballot issues that are citizen generated are simply coming from special interest groups that generally can't get their policy directed through the state legislature.
There's so many that you can put on the policy. It gets overruled by things that aren't that important, so that way it shadows everything that is important.
Which candidate do you think is going to be better at carrying your agenda to terms?
Trump, because he's pro-gun. He doesn't want to take our rights away.
Trump every day. You can see as soon as the Trump gets influence into the market, we get to see a whole Wall Street just rising above.
Harris, no doubt, as opposed to, just insulting people. I think she actually thinks things through.
Better candidate right now would be Mr. Trump, because right now he already has a policy in place. He had it back in his in his presidency already.
Harris, because that's exactly what her agenda is to try to appeal to people, all different kinds of people.
I also am going to be voting for Trump. I feel like his policies are amazing, and has track record.
I would say Kamala Harris can do that. Hopefully we can get more independent on our fuel in our country and do our own thing.
I'm waiting to the closing arguments. I'm waiting to make my decision when I walk in there, because I generally vote on election day. I don't usually vote during the general elections, and I'll make up my mind when I go in there.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Apple has included a raft of new AI features in its latest beta release. Only certain software developers have gotten the new version, and we speak with them to get their thoughts. Here's the story.
Apple on Wednesday released a bunch of new Apple Intelligence features, but only for certain software developers, with a beta version of I/O2 18.2. Apple says the features may be released to the public later this year. These include Image Playground,
where you can create stylized images based on prompts, or if you have like a person in your camera roll, you can put them up into the Image Playground, which is a standalone application now, and it will create a version of them of whatever you want.
YouTuber Brandon Butch shows on his channel you can tap on suggestions from a menu.
But if you want to make this, let's just say Halloween, so we'll add that into the mix, and let's add in a chef hat as a costume, and maybe one more thing. Maybe we'll add some sunglasses as well. And actually, I want to change the environment. So let's go back and change the environment to maybe a desert. So we'll add all these things into one, and then this application will create an image for me.
A similar feature is Genmoji, in which users can create their own emojis with a text prompt. They can also create an emoji of themselves in a cowboy hat. Another feature, writing tools. In any app that supports this feature, Apple can give you writing suggestions, correct grammar, and rewrite your text.
You could write a nasty gram to your boss, filled with expletives and just the worst terms possible, and you can decide, oh wait, maybe I don't want that, but I want the same message. And you can tell Apple Intelligence to write that with a business perspective, with a better tone.
Apple Insider Managing Editor Michael Worthley says he thinks the writing tools will get the most use. Apple says it'll prioritize user privacy with the new features. It'll try to do as much on an account as possible and not store data.
They do have integrations with ChatGPT, which you can't necessarily say is going to have the same treatment. If you have a ChatGPT account, then ChatGPT has the right to do what they please with your query and with your results.
For its integration with ChatGPT, Apple says it'll hide users' IP address, ask for permission, not store requests, and do everything on device. But under certain settings, if you choose to use your ChatGPT account on Siri, OpenAI may be able to access data. The features may launch in December if Apple follows its previous history of launch dates.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start in baseball as ticket prices to the 2024 World Series are on pace to being the highest in years on StubHub and Vivid Seats. What is it about this matchup that's so attractive?
You know, pretty much everything. You know, for one, it's New York versus Los Angeles, the two biggest markets. Plus, these two franchises, Dodgers and Yankees, are probably the two most valuable franchises in baseball. They certainly have the two biggest fan bases. These are probably also the two most successful franchises. Certainly the Yankees are number one. Dodgers probably right there with the Cardinals and Giants maybe for number two. But also even these two have a rivalry back when the Dodgers were in Brooklyn like 80 years ago. Now this is the 12th time these two have matched up in the World Series. That's the most ever. And LA, they've got plenty of payback. The Yankees have won 8 of their previous 11 World Series appearances. Now, I think the biggest reason though is star power. You know, you probably have both MVPs in this series. That's Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge. I mean, it's hard to believe that all-star caliber players like Mookie Betts, like Juan Soto are actually going to take a back seat in this series. But that's how loaded it is. So anyway, Game 1 starts Friday night. I think the Dodgers are going to win in 7.
Shifting gears to the NFL, tonight's Thursday night game features the Vikings against the Rams. Now, you've said that Minnesota has been the biggest surprise thus far. What's been working for them?
You know, most everything. I wrote them off after Kirk Cousins left in free agency, in the spring. And then they draft his successor, J.J. McCarthy, in the first round. He's injured in the preseason, is going to be out for the entire year. But now Sam Darnold, he's on his 4th different team in like 6 years. He looks like the player the Jets drafted in 2018 in the first round. They thought he would be his franchise quarterback back then. Now he's in the top 10 in a number of passing categories right now, really rejuvenated career. Now, I'll grant it certainly helps when you have Justin Jefferson to throw to, one of the best receivers in the league. And if you're like me and you pass on him in your fantasy football team because you were afraid of who's going to be throwing him the ball, you're certainly regretting it right now. But anyway, for the Rams, they saw Matthew Stafford. He's been without his two top receivers, that's Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, for most of the season. It looks like Nacua is going to be at least activated for tonight's game. I don't know if how much he's going to play. But anyway, tonight's game starts at 8:15 Eastern Time, and it's on Amazon Prime.
Well, Davis, always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.